Hello, my supernatural superstars. This is me, Belle. I'm just a normal girl with a slight obsession for the creepy, the crawly, the morbid, and the occult. My personal goal is to keep you on the edge of your seat and make you wonder if that noise you heard last night was really a mouse. So, turn off your lights, sit back and relax, and I'll keep you safe. At least I'll try to. Welcome to Belle's terrifying tales of horror, murder, mystery, the occult, and all other things that go bump in the night. I'm sure that when Disneyland introduced the Matterhorn ride and opened it up to the public on June 14th, 1959, they had no idea of the horrific incidents that would ensue or that they would forever mark the park's ride as one of Disneyland's deadliest ever. It's not so much that people have died on the ride. Accidents happen every day, everywhere, and being mortal means that some of these accidents can threaten and even take our lives. But the real terror here comes from the gruesome way they died and from realizing that in the end, the happiest place on earth isn't as happy as we'd like to believe. We might even call this particular ride cursed. The story I'm about to tell you will change the way you look at Disneyland forever and will even make you think twice before boarding a seemingly innocent ride again. Are you ready? Then take my hand, hold it tight, and let's walk into the darkness together. The Matterhorn ride was one of Walt Disney's own creations. He wanted a ride that would give the people who boarded it the sensation of zipping down a snow capped mountain on a bobsled. In fact, the ride is actually designed to look like the actual Matterhorn mountain in Sweden. This mountain, however, comes equipped with two tracks that run parallel to each other for almost the entire time of the ride. Passengers that ride will be boarding into two cars, one passenger sitting behind the other so that it looks like a single file line. The ride comes complete with a friction fastener seatbelt, where you slide the belt through a buckle and close it. Then you whoosh down the mountain and through some caverns that have been added for extra thrills. This goes on for about a minute or so. Sounds fun, right? Mark Maples thought so. He and his two friends all boarded the ride on May 16th, 1964 at around midnight. They were one of, if not the last group of visitors to get on the ride that night. No one seems to know the why, but after the ride had started up and had reached a speed of 20 miles per hour, either Mark or one of his friends, depending on what story you're going by, unfastened his seatbelt. Mark then stood up with the ride still in motion, which caused him to lose his balance and be thrown from the ride's car, hitting his head and cracking his skull on the concrete side of the mountain. He also fractured his ribs and ended up with other internal injuries. His friends tried to tell the ride operators what had happened once they reached the end of the ride, but they weren't believed. Two girls that sat in the back seats behind Mark had to confirm the story before an employee went out on the track to check. He found Mark lying exactly where he had fallen. The paramedics were finally called and upon arrival found Mark still unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital and hooked up to a ventilator. But the severe head trauma he had suffered and his other injuries were too much for him to recover from. Mark died 3 days later, never having recovered consciousness. He was only 15 years old. Now, Mark was the very first death at the Disneyland park, but it's not the last. There have been other deaths throughout the park, the Matterhorn ride being responsible for another one of these almost 20 years after Mark's. The similarities in both cases are very scary when you think about it, although I find the second incident to be more gruesome. Dolly Regina Young, a 48-year-old woman from Fremont, California, went to the Disneyland park with five of her friends. At around 3:30 p.m. on January 3rd, 1984, they decided to get on the Matterhorn ride, Dolly taking the last seat at the end of the second car, putting herself way in the back where no one could see her. Just like with Mark, no one is sure why, but at around the halfway point of the ride, Dolly fell from the car she was in and onto the ride's tracks. Those who saw her said that she did try to get up, but she wasn't fast enough. Just 30 seconds after Dolly fell from her seat, the next set of park visitors was whooshing down the mountain right at her. Dolly was impacted by their car, which was going at 20 miles per hour. She was instantly decapitated and her body became wedged under the car, which immediately shut down that portion of the ride. The screams from the passengers in the car were heard by the operators, who then ran towards the accident as fast as possible. Dolly was pronounced dead at the scene as soon as the cops and the paramedics showed up. The police launched an investigation to see if they could figure out what had happened, and although they did rule out suicide and foul play, the fact was that Dolly had fallen off the ride and that her seatbelt had been found undone. Disney swore that it was impossible for her to have started the ride without her seatbelt on, because the operators are trained to never start the ride until they have checked every person's seatbelt twice, making sure there could be no accidents. The police also found that there was nothing wrong with the ride and that nothing had broken down during the accident. So, this means that if we believe the cops and Disney, our only option here is to assume that Dolly unfastened the seatbelt herself. I could see a 15-year-old maybe doing this, but a grown 48-year-old woman? I find that extremely hard to believe, especially if you're ruling out suicide. But those are the facts given to us. Her husband did file a $5 million lawsuit against Disney for negligence a month after the accident happened. But 4 years later, right when they were about to go to court, he and Disney came to an agreement and settled out of court. Part of the agreement was to keep the details of it quiet, so unfortunately, we'll never know what happened. If you can believe it, Disneyland reopened the Matterhorn ride on the very next day after the accident because the ride proved to be in perfect working condition and safe enough to satisfy whoever it is that deals with these situations. Since the accident, Disney has replaced the old seatbelts with snap buckle belts, which are the same type that most automobiles are equipped with. Their spokesman Bob Roth said that the change had nothing to do with the accident, but was simply because the old supplier had gone out of business. And here's where we get to the supernatural part. Sort of. The area where Dolly was decapitated was dubbed Dolly's Dip by the park employees, and I'm not sure I want to know how that became a thing. But anyway, I'd love to tell you that I have hundreds of stories about people having supernatural experiences here, but I don't. What I have are claims that park employees believe she haunts the ride because they feel a strange presence when they walk Dolly's Dip at night. Some say they have felt like they're being watched, others have felt cold spots or heard whispers, and there are a few that have claimed to have seen her. But the details are never specified. There is never a full account on one of these incidents. There is one employee who said the lights around the area are always burnt out, and that does tend to be a side effect of having a spirit roaming around, but I'm just not sure about this one. Either way, I found the stories of these two unfortunate people to be dark enough to earn them a spot here. There is also the similarities of both, the unknown reason why the belt was unfastened, the falling out of the car, and the severe head injuries that they both suffered. It makes me wonder if there aren't some hidden supernatural energies at work here. However, over 5 million people ride the Matterhorn every year, and thankfully, since Dolly's death, no one else has ended up severely injured or dead on this particular ride. Could that be because of the change with seatbelts? I don't know. I'm just glad that whatever happened to Mark and Dolly hasn't happened again since. As much as I like sharing these stories with you and feeding my own morbid curiosity in the process, I'd obviously prefer not to have accidents like this happen to anyone. That's all I've got for today. Thanks for listening. Make sure to comment and let me know your thoughts on these two terrible accidents, your theories on what happened, if you really believe the ride is haunted, and what you believe about the similarities going on between the two deaths. Also, remember to leave a like if you liked and subscribe if you want more. Until next time.